So when you think of films that won the Best Picture Oscar in the 1970s, what comes to mind? The Godfather, probably, and The Godfather Part 2, of course. Now, a film that might not immediately come to mind was something that didn't just take Best Picture and Best Director, but pretty much swept the categories at the 46th Academy Awards on April 2nd, 1974, with 7 wins total. George Roy Hill's The Sting, the period crime drama starring Robert Redford and Paul Newman. At the Oscar ceremony that took place in the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion 50 years ago, was The Sting the favorite to win in many of the top categories? The answer is not necessarily, because as much as The Sting ultimately dominated at that year's Academy Awards, another celebrated movie at the time had a good chance of overtaking it, William Friedkin's masterpiece, The Exorcist. Both The Sting and The Exorcist came out the last week of 1973. Both films were acclaimed by critics and audiences, and both were blockbuster hits, The Exorcist especially a phenomenon at the box office. And back in the day when there was really only one major precursor ceremony, the Golden Globe Awards, it was The Exorcist that swept there, so how did The Sting pull ahead? Did Robert Redford have a chance at winning Best Actor on his only Oscar nomination ever for acting? And how close, really, did The Exorcist come to taking the top prizes at the 46th Academy Awards? My name is Brian Rowe, this is the awards contender, and Cody Derricks from Next Best Picture is here to help me break everything down. Are you ready? It's time to talk The Sting at the Oscars. Here we go. According to the behind-the-scenes documentary on the DVD, Robert Redford was approached about The Sting first, and he recommended George Roy Hill to come on board as director, Redford wanting a seasoned veteran who could help shape the script into an entertaining and compelling movie. Later on, Paul Newman joined the film, making for a reunion of the director and co-leads of 1969's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Set during the Great Depression in the 1930s and featuring title cards throughout in a style reminiscent of the Saturday Evening Post, The Sting tells of 2 grifters played by Redford and Newman who team up to pull off the ultimate con.
You're right, Henry. It's not enough. It's close.
The movie was released on Christmas Day 1973, and it quickly became a box office smash, grossing more than $250 million worldwide. Critics adored it, Roger Ebert giving it 4 out of 4 stars and calling it one of the most stylish movies of the year, while Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times said it was the kind of pure entertainment film that's all the more welcome for having become such a rarity. With that director, that cast, the box office, and those reviews, The Sting appeared set to become an award season juggernaut. But then came the Golden Globes, which went in a different direction. The 31st Golden Globe Awards were held on January 26, 1974, and get this, they not only didn't award The Sting anything that night, they only nominated it for Best Screenplay and nothing else. The Hollywood Foreign Press instead went all in on The Exorcist, giving it Best Supporting Actress for Linda Blair, Best Director for William Friedkin, and Best Motion Picture Drama. So what the hell happened at the Globes with The Sting? Here's what Cody and I talked about.
It's really bizarre because you would think with their category comedies, I assume this would run as a comedy. I think its energy points towards the comedic, even though it starts with a murder, ends with a fake murder, but still very enjoyable throughout. I have no idea why The Sting is nowhere to be found here or in the actor in a comedy categories, you know?
Yeah.
Like, 2 huge movie stars leading this movie. And I think if either of them had been in, they could have won.
The thinking would be, oh, it came out Christmas week. It came out too late, so they just missed it. They didn't see it or something. But then having The Exorcist, which came out the same week, get in everywhere, win a bunch of stuff. I feel like that negates that argument, right? Like they clearly had time to see The Sting.
And it did get a screenplay nomination. So somebody saw it at the in the Hollywood Foreign Press. I mean, maybe they didn't get enough nice watches or something from Universal. Who knows?
Is Cody right? Did Universal not send out enough gold watches, enough prizes to the Hollywood foreign press in early 1974? It's kind of dumbfounding why this wonderful movie didn't at least get nominations in the motion picture comedy or musical categories in acting and picture, but clearly the Golden Globes didn't have much impact on eventual Oscar voting that year because a few months later, things changed big time for The Sting. After getting snubbed almost entirely at the Globes, The Sting received a whopping 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor for Robert Redford. Can you believe that nomination for Redford remains his only acting Oscar nod in his entire career? And why did Redford get in over Paul Newman, the latter a much more beloved figure of the Academies? Here's what Cody and I discussed.
I think that's the question, is that it's which of the two actors in this movie, if you had to pick one, is more worthy of an Oscar nomination. And I guess the nomination for Redford comes for two reasons. One, I think he's a slightly bigger character. He has like 20 minutes just to himself in the beginning. He gets more stuff by himself when he's being like dragged away by the cops and stuff. And he also has The Way We Were this same year, which the Oscars also liked. You know, Streisand gets an actress nomination. It's also a big hit. So I think Robert Redford was probably getting in for as much that and the box office success as The Sting. I'm just kind of surprised that Newman also didn't get in because, you know, they were nominating him a lot in this era. But then you look at the five guys they nominated, it's a pretty solid lineup. There's really little wiggle room here. I don't really know who would get knocked off. And you can see why every single guy got nominated, especially in this year. They're all beloved, you know, stalwarts of Hollywood. They're all household names to this day. So I don't know where I would put Newman in this category.
At the end of the day, whether it was Newman or Redford, they weren't going to win Best Actor because this is the year the great Jack Lemmon finally won his Best Actor Academy Award for his remarkable performance in Save the Tiger. I love Lemmon's enthusiasm upon hearing he won, and he gives a great speech as well. Redford wasn't even there, so clearly he had an inkling someone else was winning. Jack Nicholson was there on his third nomination for The Last Detail, and Al Pacino attends his only Oscar ceremony of the 1970s as a nominee. Reportedly, Pacino, who was nominated that year for Serpico, was so wasted on alcohol and drugs that night, he felt he wouldn't have been able to make it to the stage if he had won. The Sting wasn't up for anything in Best Supporting Actor, that trophy going to John Houseman for his excellent performance as a very strict professor in The Paper Chase. Robert Shaw, the villain of The Sting, would have made a great nominee in this category, but according to Julia Phillips' book You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again, Shaw missed out on that nomination because he demanded his name follow Newman and Redford's before the film's opening title, making him a contender in lead actor. So at the 46th Academy Awards, soon after Liza Minnelli's spectacular opening number, which I highly recommend you watch in full on YouTube, as well as a rare Oscar appearance from the legendary Alfred Hitchcock, The Sting started picking up momentum after it won Best Film Editing for William Reynolds, Best Art Direction for Harry Bumstead and James Payne, and Best Costume Design for the amazing Edith Head, whose win here marked her 8th and final competitive Oscar trophy.
Just imagine dressing the two handsomest men in the world and then getting this.
Marvin Hamlish won an Oscar for his score to The Sting, as well as his score for The Way We Were. Yep, 2 Robert Redford movies, and 2 Oscars in the same ceremony back to back. Hey, Cher thought it was pretty funny. Now, by the time The Sting took the Best Original Screenplay prize for David S. Ward, I'm pretty sure anyone with half a brain felt pretty confident The Sting was going to win the top 2 prizes of the night. Indeed, it was George Roy Hill who was victorious this one and only time at the Oscars in the Best Director category. The big question is, does Cody agree with this win?
No. Sorry, Mr. Hill. I think he has a lovely career. He does, you know, he directs this movie very well. I think he has a nice zippy energy to it, which is, again, thanks to the screenplay, the editing, and the directing, and the performances. All of it pulled together, which you have to lay at the feet of the director at a certain point. But I mean, what William Friedkin does with The Exorcist is just legendary. It is the first real horror movie to get into Best Picture, and you can see why, because he put, so much craft and attention to the making of it.
If Friedkin had not won for French Connection, I do think he would have been very much in contention, even if The Sting won picture, because they did do a split the year before. Bob Fosse won director for Cabaret, and then they gave The Godfather Best Picture. So they will do a split here and there, even though I feel like it's not as common in this decade, this era, than it is today.
Right. It's really, we're in an era of that happening more than the Academy's ever done previously.
Yeah. But I do feel like Friedkin might have eked out a win if he hadn't just won for French Connection.
George Roy Hill might have had some competition, but the Academy so clearly loved The Sting, it was going to be hard for him to lose. Same goes for the Best Picture prize, which arrived after Katharine Hepburn made her only Oscars appearance, and after very famously a streaker named Robert Opel ran across the stage naked, flashing a peace sign to the audience, David Niven delivering this perfectly timed joke in the moment.
Fascinating to think that probably the only laugh that man will ever get in his life is by stripping off and showing his shortcomings.
The naked guy flustered Best Picture presenter Elizabeth Taylor momentarily.
I'm nervous. That really upset me. I think I'm jealous.
But then she opened the envelope and awarded the final prize to The Sting.
I think because of the trajectory of The Sting and it getting all of those wins in technical categories, screenplay, and then director, there was no way it was going to lose here.
Right. I mean, at this point in the ceremony, The Exorcist only has 2 Oscars. Touch of Class and Cries and Whispers have 1 each. American Graffiti has none, and The Sting has 6. So I can't imagine this being a surprise for anybody at this point. Again, I don't think it's my pick for director or picture, but it's a well-made movie, so I can't really object too hard to any of its wins. And even though I probably would only put it number 4 at best in Best Picture, it's still a solid win.
What would be if you were a voter? What would you vote for in Best Picture?
The Exorcist, hands down, no question.
I agree with Cody. I would have chosen The Exorcist to win in Best Picture too. It is to me unequivocally the best film of 1973, as I've discussed in 3 previous videos about the 46th Academy Awards. The first exploring the Best Actress race, where Glenda Jackson for A Touch of Class defeated Ellen Burstyn for The Exorcist. The second exploring the Best Supporting Actress race, where Tatum O'Neal for Paper Moon defeated Linda Blair for The Exorcist. And the third exploring and celebrating The Exorcist at the Oscars in all its glory. Well, kind of glory, given that the film only won Best Adapted Screenplay for William Peter Blatty and Best Sound. As I've talked about, the film had a tremendous showing at the Golden Globe Awards, so why did The Exorcist fall short at the Oscars in terms of wins? Here's what Cody and I discussed.
It's funny, sometimes I wonder if there was this kind of charge to reward The Sting over The Exorcist because the Academy didn't want to throw everything at a horror film. I've always wondered that. Like, if they were just like, okay, we need to get behind something else. I feel like it was either going to be The Sting or American Graffiti, and they went with The Sting.
Right. So I was actually reading up on this in the excellent book Inside Oscar, and there definitely was pushback from some of the other members of the Academy. Specifically, there's the category of Best Visual Effects, which back then would pop up and have usually only 2 or 3 nominees. Actually, I think just 2 up to this point, or just 1. They would just give 1 award as a special award, like the previous year they did with the Poseidon Adventure. Mm-hmm. And so this year, if you look at the Wikipedia list, there's just no award given for this year. And the word is that it's because older members of the Academy, especially people like George Cukor is mentioned, really old guard people who, founded the way we know Hollywood to be today from that era, really pushed back against The Exorcist being acknowledged by the Academy because it was so horror and grotesque and especially visual effects. The Exorcist team said basically they got rid of the category because it would have gone to us, and they didn't want it to have one more place to be rewarded. But it totally should have been awarded for best special effects.
You better believe there was a campaign behind the scenes in 1974 to prevent a terrifying horror film from winning much at the Oscars that year, like, as Cody mentioned, excluding the Best Visual Effects category, which The Exorcist would have been a shoo-in for. According to a 2018 article by Bill Higgins in The Hollywood Reporter, The Exorcist novelist and Oscar-winning screenwriter William Peter Blatty wrote a pretty brutal diatribe The Hollywood Reporter plastered on its front page, where he said it was a disgrace that his film didn't win more awards, and that The Exorcist was head and shoulders the finest film made this year and in many other years. He also called out director George Cukor, who Cody just mentioned, for leading the campaign against The Exorcist just because it was a scary genre film. The Academy would finally embrace the genre nearly 20 years later in early 1992 when they awarded The Silence of the Lambs 5 of their top prizes, but clearly they weren't ready for The Exorcist in '74, and so they gave The Sting Best Picture instead. It's not a bad win, to be sure. Watching it again recently, I was perfectly entertained by The Sting, as was Cody.
I think it's a movie that stands up well. I don't think it's talked about as much amongst the general public now as it probably was when it won, when it was a huge hit. I think The Exorcist definitely takes the cake in terms of having a greater legacy 50 years on. But I think for anybody that watched it, they're in for a good time, which sometimes that's all you need with a movie.
It might not be the most memorable Best Picture winner of the 1970s, but The Sting is a terrific film, well written and directed, with fantastic performances, especially by the dreamy and charismatic Robert Redford in one of his best movie roles ever. Cody's absolutely right. Sometimes that's all you need. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments below, what do you think about The Sting winning the Oscars for Best Picture and Best Director? Would you have preferred The Exorcist win instead? We'll see you next time at the awards contender.